Andrew, a real delight to have you on board to talk about, of course, Sparkling Pointe. We're going to talk about Long Island as well. You see it on the map there in blue next to New York City. So we're going to get stuck into those. But I think the best thing to do to begin with is just to introduce yourself and then perhaps go into the detail about this. Let's call it a champagne house in Long Island and talk about Sparkling Pointe. I mean, if anyone didn't know already it was going to be sparkling wines, then there we are. But Andrew, please take center stage.
My name is Andrew Rockwell. I'm the head winemaker at Sparkling Pointe on the North Fork of Long Island. If my pointer is working here effectively, that's right here. So if you see Long Island, a lot of people are familiar with the Hamptons. That's this area right here. This area gives us a very special viticultural advantage to the rest of areas in the East Coast. There's a body of water here. There's a body of water here. And there's a body of water in the middle here, actually, too. So that maritime influence there really moderates us. Oh, even better. Moderates us. So right here is Southold. That's where our winery is, from the hottest points in the summer and the coolest points in the winter. You'll find if we go back to the map here, why are these wine regions even where they are? You'll see the Finger Lakes, water. Lake Erie, water. Hudson Valley, water. Hudson Valley, water. And Champlain, Lake Champlain there, water. And why is that? It's because everywhere outside of that, and most of the East Coast, as you go more continental, is brutally cold in the winter and are subjective to vine death. So that is, despite any other challenges that might come with growing grapes on the East Coast, if your vines die from a cold winter every couple of years, it's game over. So you'll find most of the viticulture areas on the East Coast associated with some sort of body of water for that moderating influence. Here at Sparkling Pointe, we do nothing but sparkling wine. I said we're kind of a champagne house in a way. Here on the North Fork of Long Island, we're the only house that's dedicated purely to sparkling wine, and we grow the classic champagne varietals. That's Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. And we go through the method traditional or method champenois, where we press the grapes very gently, take a very careful heart juice of the highest quality. We then bottle that with a little bit of sugar and yeast to create another fermentation in the bottle after it's gone through its normal primary fermentation like a white wine. And then it sits on tirage on the yeast for anywhere between 1 and maybe as long as 10 years, depending on the cuvee. One of the ones we're going to taste today, this 14 Brut Seduction. Mm-hmm. That's right here. That's the one that's about 10 years on the lease.
So, Andrew, what a great business plan, right? Because Long Island, we were chatting in the green room just before, you've got New York State, you've got Connecticut, and you've got a lot of people that go to Long Island for a little bit of a holiday. They might go for a day visit, and to have a sparkling house production there, that just fits the bill perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it does. And I think that's really the heart of why Tom and Cynthia Rosicki started this place with that vision. They actually are both big fans of traveling to London, and the owner spent quite a lot of time in London in the stage before she went on to her career as a lawyer. And Sparkling Pointe's about fun. It's about having a good time. The scene behind me, we said before, is Carnival. It's their other favorite place after London in the North Fork of Long Island is Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where they are right now. And it all does sort of play in. And when they got started, that was really the angle they had, is no one else is doing just sparkling wine. Sparkling wine's a lot of fun. Let's have a place dedicated to that. Fortunately for them, they happened to pick like a very good place to make it, and it's a great fit for our growing region. I don't think they really understood that going into it. They sort of lucked out. And from my experience here, I've been here on Long Island making wine for almost 20 years now, and I've even seen from the very first year I started out here that the sparkling wines from all the different wineries on Long Island, and really almost New York in general, were frequently always the best wines from that winery. Well, the quality year in, year out was always there. You just always saw really nice wines. I saw that from winery to winery. It's the opportunity to come work at a place and make wine for a place that was dedicated just to sparkling wine. I felt really great about the sustainability of that brand, of that vision, and the ability to make a high quality wine year in, year out. And then some really fantastic great wines in our best years.
So with Long Island, it has an absolute immediate market. It is right next to New York City, and no doubt, with its local tourism as well of Long Island. Is there much of a need for people to think outside of the box, as it were? Do we Long Island? Do they need to put wines into other states? I was in Virginia recently. I do a lot of work with wines in Virginia, and they're at this point now where they've grown. They need to think about going into other states, whereas they haven't done before, because really they just sell it into Washington, D.C. or to Richmond or Charlottesville. Is that something where Long Island is at in terms of the New York State picture? Is it growing now where you're starting to look outside of its local boundaries?
Yeah, I think we see a mix. We see some smaller wineries that focus on just retail sales and having the tourism that comes to their respective areas, whether that's Eastern Long Island, the Finger Lakes, Hudson region, wherever that might be. That's the driver of really their business. Other businesses that maybe are a little bit bigger or are looking for growth, they're looking outside of that. Or businesses like I would say, like ourselves, that are trying to do both at the same time. So we're taking advantage of that tourism that comes out here, our beautiful retail space. People can come see the facility, but then also trying to broaden our range. So we have distribution in Washington, D.C., Virginia, into Connecticut, into Massachusetts. We've sent some wine to Puerto Rico. So yeah, we are looking to expand beyond our area. There's only a certain number of people that come out here. And I think also just as a general wine professional and someone trying to establish a brand, you need to get these wines into the hands of people in these key wine markets, and really into the people that love wine. That's the whole point of making it. What's the point of making it if we can't share it, if it just stays in our little area? We do want it out there. And as you say, our proximity to New York City is an interesting one. We find it to be like a blessing and a curse. So it's a blessing because it's one of the biggest wine markets in the world. It's one of the most sophisticated wine markets in the world. Also, it's one of the most competitive as well. So, if you're in New York City, you can get a wine from anywhere in the world, right in your face at any time. There's always something new. There's always something interesting. You really have to step up your game, and you really have to be on point if you want to fight into that market.
On your Sparkling Point, nice use of pun there, Andrew.
Exactly. I was definitely on purpose.
So the other thing I wanted to mention as well is so Tom and Cynthia established this brand. It's about 20 years ago, right? It's roughly about 20.
Yeah, about that. I think I have my exact notes here somewhere, but yeah, about 20 years ago, early 2000s.
So of course you mentioned that they have a love for London. They have a love for Carnival, which I think when I went to Carnival, all I drank was Brahma beer. I can't remember really drinking much else.
Yeah, not a lot of sparkling down there. There is a Brazilian sparkling wine. I got to go a few years back. I did have a Brazilian sparkling wine. They're making some headways, believe it or not.
But I'm not
That's the
sure.
one I'd recommend.
I'm not sure that would be their inspiration for what they've done, right? So
Yeah.
where did their inspiration come from to produce this really important sparkling house in Long Island? And has there been any key connections and key influences in their journey to this point?
Yeah, I think as crazy as it sounds, I think like what I was saying initially is really their inspiration. They did very fortunate with their law firm after they left London and moved on with their life, and they loved having parties and they loved sparkling wine and they loved Taittinger, and they said we want to maybe open a winery, buy some land, and grow some grapes. And they talked to Steve Mudd, who is a longtime viticulturist, not just here on Long Island, but also known throughout the entire Northeast. He's planted a lot of the vineyards throughout Long Island and a lot throughout other parts of the Northeast as well, too. His father had been one of the pioneers out here. So they connected with him. He's actually I point this way because he's right across the street from us. And he helped them to establish the vineyard. He was one of the first people to bring over Pinot Noir clones to Long Island from Oregon many decades ago. So it was a very natural connection. And they knew they wanted to make sparkling wine. So they said, Steve, we want to make sparkling wine. We need a winemaker. Who should we talk to? So there's this French gentleman, Gilles Martin, who's worked in Virginia, who's worked on Long Island at a few different wineries, and had previously worked in California at Roeder Estates in the Anderson Valley for many years. They said, well, that's who you should call. So they called Gilles, and he helped them set them up with a sparkling house here. So he had experience with Pinot Noir, had experience making sparkling here on Long Island, and he really set the infrastructure and the nuts and bolts of this place. That really I owe a lot of respect and gratitude for. That's really driven the sort of really core of what Sparkling Pointe has been and will continue to be in the future.
So
I think those are the three main connections: parties and fun and sparkling wine. Who doesn't like sparkling wine? Steve Mudd, who's our viticulturist for a long time, planted the vineyards, and then Gilles Martin, who was the first winemaker here.
so Gilles Martin comes in, first winemaker, experience, as you mentioned, at the likes of Louis Roederer Estate over in California, and lots of, let's say, lots of experience floods in. And Gilles kind of is at the helm of the ship for almost 20 years. And then you came on board. So did you start working underneath Gilles to begin with? And then,
Oh, yeah, I've been here since 2000, January 2017. So prior to this, I had been working at a custom crush facility on Long Island as the lab director. It was called Premium Wine Group. I was there for about 8 years. And when I started there, it became very apparent that I liked all the sparkling wines. I really engaged myself with trying to understand how those were made. And I really took over the building of the secondary fermentation tirage and really a lot of aspects of monitoring and making sure that part of the wine was going well. And actually, conveniently at that time, that was before Sparkling Point had built their winery. They had had the vineyard slightly before. And let's guess where they were making their wine at that time: at Premium Wine Group, the custom crush facility. So I actually got to be involved with making those wines too for a couple vintages as well. That would have been 2008 primarily, before they moved to this facility more in 2009, going into 2010. Uh, and then I continued that, other sparkling clients there as well. I got to learn from a few other great winemakers who are making sparkling wine. This gentleman, Eric Fry, another place, Lens Winery, that makes a lot of sparkling wine. Roman Roth, down at Wolfer, he's made sparkling wine for a long time, and a few other people as well. And those sort of real connections have really driven forward. So no, we and Jill worked together here for about 8 years. He left last summer, and I continue on the journey as well.
and I'm sure it's in very, very safe hands. So, Andrew, let's talk, even if you are a Jets fan, but we won't talk about that. Um, and
Not the best
over
fan. It's a sad
super
state of
bubbling. Yeah.
affairs.
No. Let's move on to maybe some people out there. I mentioned at the beginning that they might have some knowledge of New York State. They might know Finger Lakes. But let's talk about the nuts and bolts of Long Island. You mentioned about the effect of water. Um, let's talk more broadly about climate, weather, advantages, disadvantages that you find yourself growing, say, champagne varietals. What's it like in Long Island?
Yeah, I'd say our biggest advantage is because we are a cooler climate, we're able to get that phenolic ripeness and flavor development in the grapes before we get an acceleration of bricks. So think about growing things for sparkling. There's a couple things that, are important for the style. And there's one thing that's critical if you're going to do a secondary bottle fermentation, is that's the potential alcohol of the wine can't be too high. So you need to make a base wine that really can't be much above 10 or 11% alcohol if you expect to have a successful full fermentation in the bottle, to get us to this 6 atmospheres, 6 times normal atmospheric pressure in the bottle. That alcohol is toxic to the yeast. We can't go really much past that. So that means we can't really pick much past 18, 19, 20 bricks is really pushing it. So you can imagine you go to a hot climate where they're getting that bricks acceleration much quicker before they're actually able to get that hang time to develop the flavors on the grapes. That's something that why we see better sparkling wines usually coming from these cooler regions. Natural acidity is of course a very important factor as well. Cooler regions we usually associate with more natural acidity, and that kind of goes hand in hand with that sort of being able to balance those flavors as well. But I see it as the ability to have this longer hang time in a cooler climate with these champagne varieties. You put them in a warmer place, they're just going to get higher bricks. And by time you get that flavor development you want, the bricks are going to be too high. They're going to be 22, 24, something like that. And now it's not really a good base for a sparkling wine. Or, someone's going to have to make the choice to go down this path that I certainly don't want to go down, which is basically diluting it with water or something to make it acceptable for a sparkling wine. So it just doesn't become like a good chemistry fit. As
And
far as sparkling wine, particularly on Long Island, I think one real big advantage we have is we can pick the grapes early. So we have a lot of climatic issues in terms of humidity, disease pressure, cluster rots as we go past veraison for these very sensitive varieties, particularly Pinot Noir. And the ability to pick that while it's still pretty hardy allows us to make this really great wine every year, even if we get hit with some more challenging weather.
and you have a label as well, right? So you'll be picking all by hand, and you have
That's
people.
it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, you have people. You have people probably willing to get stuck in and probably willing to pay for a harvest, which is what happens in the UK as well.
Really?
Yeah, I mean it's an amazing
Well,
business.
no, we don't. No, we treat it a little bit more. We treat it a little differently here. Maybe it works there. Here, I feel like we feel like if we bring people in to do that sort of thing, they go so slow. No, it's more of bringing in a professional crew. It is an agricultural region here, even though people associate Long Island with probably suburbs or the Hamptons with big houses. The North Fork has always been more rural, and there's enough of a pool of labor here to thankfully satisfy. But I will say it's fortunate we pick early in the season because we have a bigger pool of people to pull from, people who want to pick more in October, end of September. They're all kind of competing for that same labor, maybe, whereas not as many people are doing sparkling. It's mostly us and a few other people. So we've never had huge issues with that, thankfully. And there's a timing thing too. Once we get to ripening, like we really need to pick those grapes early. And it might be sometimes a week, 10 days is the only window we have for that Pinot Noir. If it's warm, those bricks can really move quickly once it gets to ripeness. Could even move like a bricks every few days. So we really need to get a big crew in there and get that picked out fast and get it in. So now maybe we let a couple people go in a few rows for fun, but now we pay for the pickers.
Good. Well, that's good to know. As we talked about in the green room, I'm often out in Connecticut, so I won't get a call from you to come pick some grapes because I'm not very good at it. It's backbreaking work, so I won't expect that phone call.
No, you can just come clean the tank.
That's the reason I had small children. Anyway, let's talk about climate change a little bit. I know it's excuse the pun, but it's the hot topic. And we have climate chaos happening. You've experienced it recently, of course, across most of sort of New England and north of the states. That polar vortex that came in, and it's been lingering. What's been the effects for you guys as grape growers for sparkling wine on Long Island with climate change? Are you seeing a boon in the weather? Is it a positive effect, or do you worry that there are going to be increased sugar levels like we find in Champagne, for example? Is there more rain? Is it pulling up, more rain from the Atlantic, like in the UK, where we're getting warmer and wetter? What's the impact for Long Island?
Well, I think I'm plan ahead kind of guy, so I'm definitely worried, as many of us are who think ahead. The thing that the climate scientists who've come out here have told us is, I guess, probably similar to what you've heard in the UK, if we're part of this similar climatic system of the Gulf Stream, maybe, is it's going to get wetter and it's going to get warmer. So the warmer part isn't too big a deal for us since we're a cooler area, we're moderated by the sea. If anything, maybe that's a little helpful for a lot of the styles of wine that are made on Long Island. Our better years tend to be warmer years. Certainly, if it's raining every day, that's going to be very bad for everything. We don't really see that, luckily. Usually we have a good spell through July and August. This last year was probably one of the riper seasons we got for Pinot Noir here, and that's definitely from a more being a dry year. So we see a lot of vintage variation here. So we don't really have a consistent climatic thing. As far as looking ahead, what to plan for, I'm not really too concerned about not being able to make the sparkling wine. I'm more concerned about increased moisture and humidity and pressure that puts on how to control that in the vineyard and thinking about how we're going to evolve making these wines going forward. And are there acceptable varieties that we can start planning to experiment with that will require less inputs in the vineyard? I think inevitably that's also the way that the winery stays sustainable by making it more efficient out there, making it more sustainable, both from a financial perspective and from an environmental perspective. I think these are things we all care about from like anything we produce. So I think we got to think about that climate, where things are going. I don't think vineyards, from my reading of history, have ever been static in any region anywhere. So this idea, even if Pinot Noir is 1,000-year-old thing, thousands of years old, it's been evolving naturally over time, maybe less recently. And these places have planted different things over the years and over the centuries. And we got to think about that too as we evolve of having this constant. What are we thinking about as the next thing to plant, not just being stuck on one thing?
Well, Andrew, there's a fantastic phrase from one of the greatest works of literature ever, which is called The Leopard, which is a book from south of Italy, from Sicily, and the famous line from that book, made into a movie, made into a series, is it's about the change in dynasty, right, from the Bourbon dynasty, with kings and queens, etc., to a republic. And the phrase is, if we want things to stay the same, we're going to have to change. If we want to enjoy our lives and and be on this upward path of positivity, then we need to change. It's a great one-liner because we're scared of change. People are scared of change, but adapting and change is just the necessity of life, I think. And you will be left to the wayside. We can put this on an NFL analogy, but that's not. But it's very sort of similar thing, right? Where you have to adapt, and that talking about PV varietals that we were before we started filming, it might be a possibility there.
Yeah, there's a nursery up in New York for sure that's already been bringing some in. Like we're very fortunate we have Cornell University in New York, which is a viticultural and oenology university, among many other things. But all throughout New York State, you'll find agricultural extensions that are linked to Cornell, and they're our heart of who does the research on not just grapevines, but vegetables, fruits, and other things. And they're the ones that are sort of driving new varieties coming on board. I mean, for us specifically, in one of our wines, we had a little bit of like an aromatic variety for like an off-dry style we make. And so aromatic varieties are very difficult to grow. They tend to not yield well. So there's some that have come through like New York State that are more disease resistant. And, we're certainly considering right now if that's maybe a path we should go for this portion of the vineyard. And we're fortunate to have them and see that research coming. And hopefully we can make a linkage with Europe a little bit better to get some of the ones that are being developed over there this way too, because they're doing a lot of great work.
Yes, absolutely. In Freiburg, in Geisenheim, in Austria, there is some great stuff happening, and I think that sharing of knowledge is something that's I think going to be very pivotal for the whole wine industry. We're not going to go into the details of the difficulties in the wine industry in a minute, but let's talk a little bit about production methods. Of course, being a house that prides themselves on making traditional method sparkling wine, how traditional is it? And what I mean by that, are we seeing chalk caves of champagne and pupitres and hand remontage and all those sort of things? What's the kind of methodology that you employ to produce a traditional method?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes you see this very cliche thing banded around, like, traditional methods, modern techniques, stuff like that. And it kind of is the heart of like Gilles previously, me as well. We're both very technical people, science driven. So we look at, the Champenois got to where they are now from hundreds of years of trial, error, and the way they do things now. There's a lot of depth to those reasons. So we really respect a lot of those parts. So those parts that are most important, which is the pressing of the grapes, the picking of the grapes. So whole cluster pressing in a press very gently, taking this very particular part of that press cut and only using that to make this sparkling. This is very critical. When you do the separation, beyond just acidity, you can taste it. You can taste the length, the concentration in the cuvee. Even though cuvee means blend, we also use that for the heart of the juice that will become the cuvées as well. It's like night and day as this press then tails off, that last burst being the tie, how different that wine is. So by respecting that, that's the starting point of driving this great wine. We can talk about other varieties too, but there's something special about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Pinot Meunier for these blends. It does bring this very, very special wine. You can't just use any grape. So you do have to be very careful about what you make sparkling with. After that, we go through a primary fermentation that respects just the fruit. So it's a stainless steel tank fermentation. It's not very cold. It's not very hot. It's for us in Fahrenheit. It's around 64 degrees Fahrenheit, which is cool, but the not super cool. And that's on purpose. A lot of the flavors that might be interesting that come out from these cool fermentations, esters, things like this, I don't really know if those are particularly persistent over time. We're planning to build a wine.
That's just everybody out there. It's about 17 or 18 degrees Celsius, by the way.
Perfect.
Just because
just keep it under 20.
It's the only country in the world that uses Fahrenheit, but there we are. Go on.
I know it's funny actually in the American wine industry. You have to know both because everything is in gallons a lot of times in liters, so we become very familiar with using both.
Andrew, have you sorry to interrupt again, but have you seen that brilliant SNL sketch, which is called George Washington's Dream? It's a two-parter. And it's where I can't remember who was playing George Washington in the sketch, but Case Keenan's there, and it's like they're all talking about how they're going to do things differently than the British, and they're going through everything. They're going, we're going to call them gallons, and everyone's like, what's the measurement of gallon? They goes, nobody knows. And then Keenan's like, we're going to talk about slaves, right? And he goes, you asked me about the temperature, right? And he goes, no, the slave. He goes, temperature? Well, we're going to use something called Fahrenheit. But wouldn't 0 and 100 make sense, for freezing a body? No, no. It's just, I love it. I mean, I married an American, as you know, so I love this tete-a-tete between these two. So anyway, massive change there. But yes, just so everyone knows, about 17, 18 degrees Celsius.
No, I mean, it is interesting. Like, I came from the first time it really hit me was there was a probe that went to Mars like a decade or two ago that crashed because somewhere along the line someone messed up the conversion from English to metric. And I forgot the name of it, but you can definitely look that up. It's a real thing. And then when I was in school, they told me, like, so I was going to a very technical school, German classical research education at Johns Hopkins, and they were like, I know we do everything in metric, but once you go to the machine shop to get any of this stuff made from the engineering department, you have to give it to them all in English. Because the second you give it to them, they're just going to convert it to English because all the machinery in America is all tooled to English units. And that slight difference is just enough to make the thing you asked for like slightly not right. So you got to do that. So I've been used to it my whole life. So we're
Yep.
perfect for it.
Andrew, you were talking about steel ferments then for
Yeah. So we make basically a
any,
mixed wine.
any portion of oak at all in there?
A very small portion. We don't usually do too much fermenting in oak, especially unless it's like season a new barrel. We'll do some aging in oak once the wine is cleaner and once it's through filtration. We make a specific wine. We call it. It's been called our Blanc de Blanc Reserve in the past. We've turned it also towards a single vineyard wine that's got 3 different clones of Chardonnay. Those on a vineyard street called Boisseau. So we have this wine now, and that sees about maybe 6 months to 12 months in large puncheons or demi-weed, so it's 500 or 600 liter containers. And the aging of that time period will be just determined on how new of a barrel we're using. And that's to not really make it oaky, but to really just kind of give some of that astringency, some of that tannin that's very nice in a sparkling wine. It's very, very little. And then just this expression that comes from some of that oxidation from the barrel, the little lift of aromatics from the oak. And that's very nice. Outside of that, not really, with the exception of the wines we use to make the dosage. So we put a lot of care in these trials we do for the final disgorgement of the wine. So as we go through that typical stainless steel fermentation that we talked about, base wine, we go to tirage. We bottle it just as you would like a classic method champenois, nothing funny there at all. And then it goes in ages. We do automatic riddling for our space. And then when we get to disgorgement, that liquor that we use at dosage is very special because we have a cask of very old wines. Things have been aging out, things have been aging in stainless steel, going back maybe like a decade that we can kind of do that final seasoning with. But no, as a general statement, none of the wines are really oaky. If one of them gets anything, it's like 1 or 2% maybe.
Andrew, it's really music to my ears to hear someone talk so passionately about the quality of the dosage, because I think it's something which is often not discussed enough. And I think it's often because many traditional producers around the world probably don't put too much time and attention into it. But you are adding a finishing touch before that wine then goes, becomes habillage, becomes dressed and goes to market. It's that finishing touch. If you don't think about the quality of that dosage, it's super important because it could really affect the wine.
I think if you haven't gone through tasting those, you would think that, well, how could it matter? I'm only adding maybe like 6 milliliters to a 750 milliliter bottle. It's not even 1%. How can it matter? But when you taste them, sometimes it's very apparent. Like we can really, it's between us as wine professionals, wine geeks. Like we'll notice the difference. Maybe the average person isn't going to notice, but it is this last opportunity to shift something, and we can really make a stylistic impact where something goes from being like kind of flat to very bold. We can bring that little extra bump of fruit. And I think, yeah, if you haven't and you're used to just making it be either rectified grape must, which is very common, or just sugar water, or even some people take the bottle of wine that it is, empty that out, and then just use that to mix and make the dosage with that. There's different paths you can take, but to do these trials, take that care. I think it really does make a big impact on the final wine quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I had my epiphany with sparkling wine when I started to study the champagne specialist, and many years ago, I never put so much thought into it before about the quality of that dosage and tasting a lot of Vin Clair, which they're mixing, with sugar, and then also talking to a lot of cava producers at that time who were trialing instead of utilizing standard means that you mentioned, utilizing sherry like Oloroso or Montillado or Fino to utilize that little point of difference. And I just thought, wow, this is so creative. So you can be creative, but you can also be quality driven, which of
Yeah,
course.
that's interesting. So you can think of something. Can't speak to what those particular producers were doing, but just even my mind thinks, yeah, you could take something that's a younger cava, you can incorporate something that has now this oxidized age characteristic that's somewhat reminiscent of what you might get from extended lease aging in a bottle, but you still have the freshness as well, or you're just quicker to market, or you're making something interesting. But it plays together. We get those like hazelnutty kind of characters, nutty characters you get from like a nice sherry. You get that in like an aged sparkling. So there is like this sherry kind of characteristic that I think plays across those two stylistic categories, especially for like an extended tirage sparkling. That's quite interesting.
So, Andrew, we have two sparkling wines to taste, and thank you so much for supplying the samples for this. It's been great because, as you know, I'm in Lanzarote. There's not much sparkling wine here. Wine is really interesting here. It's volcanic, but it's been lovely to open this up last night, and it's been lovely to have a glass of Long Island sparkling. I don't know if this has there ever been an interview done before where we're talking about a Long Island sparkling traditional method where someone's in Lanzarote drinking it. I don't know.
I don't know, but I think I got to go myself so we can make it a twofer. You tested the waters for me. I'll be the second guy.
The waters are warm as well. They're lovely. Let's talk about the first then. So we've got two here. So the first we have is the 2020 Brut, and this is delicious. I've really love the elegance on this. I love that there is a softness behind it as well. And do you know what? Being a British, I'm going to draw the comparison. I find a similarity to English sparkling wine. And there's another question here, Andrew, as well. I'm sure you've tried a few English sparkling wines now. I have tried a emergence of English sparkling wine, which has been fantastic, and Long Island along the same sort of trajectory. Do you see a lot of similarities between the styles of English sparkling and Long Island?
I don't quite, I don't want to make a fool of myself among someone who's probably much more specialist than me. We've had a few that have come this way. Of course, long ago, like Ridgeway made its way in here very early on, and then a smattering of a few others. We've tried to do some events here featuring other sparkling wines for fun for everyone, and we've always tried to find ones when we can. I think the synergy that I see is certainly like trying to find a style that works for your region. So we have the same climatic challenges in terms of humidity, I think, of not a lot of heat, which, for this style can be good for making a bold red wine, maybe not so much of Cabernet Sauvignon. So we try to think about what we can do. We're certainly different from you guys in a way that you guys have very different soil construction than us. You guys are having that chalky soil that's sort of the same outcropping from Champagne. So you have kind of the synergy, I think, with that you can kind of play with. For us, we're more maritime and sandy. So this sandy soil does a couple things for us that allow us to grow grapes here. It allows for really great drainage. So even when we do rain, we don't get like wet feet on the grapes, and that stuff really knocks out well. It also reduces the yield of the crop, which not great for business, but it really makes it impossible almost for someone to like over yield the grapes out here. You can't even do it if you wanted to. So those things are different. I think trying to grab hold of this style that a lot of people like, that the Champenois have kind of like captured for themselves for a long time, and showing what like these other regions can do with it and how you can make these great wines out of Champagne. I think that's opened a lot of people's eyes. Both the UK doing it, us doing it, and other places doing it as well. If you can get those pieces together of that cool climate where you can get that flavor development, you can get the right people in place, you can really, I think you can do a really great job. And then we are lucky, as you are lucky too in the UK, that you're not as beholden to the traditions of Champagne. So you can do things a little bit different, whether that's planting different grapes. So that's just picking how you want it, pressing how you want it, going for maybe even a level of ripeness that's not as traditional. I'd say for us, that's the like thing that's maybe less traditional than Champagne, is we probably strive to achieve a little bit more phenolic ripeness if we can. So I'm really looking to really capture some of those primary fruit flavors from the grapes while still respecting like the tension of the wine, the finesse of the wine, and that natural acidity. And that's a delicate balance. And I feel like maybe in Champagne, maybe things change with climate change a bit. They're frequently more happy in a lot of places with this very just sort of steely, minerally, very dry style of wine that is more driven by the autolysis of the yeast and not so much at all by the fruit. I like prefer the marriage of the two. That's something I think that we can achieve here because maybe a little bit riper here sometimes than maybe one would be in certain areas of
So if you're looking more slightly more phenolic, a little bit more ripeness, than comparing to say champagne or UK sparkling wine, then is Lee's contact not something you need to have hugely extended versions of? Of course, in champagne, it can go up to 12, 14 years in some cases, right? Because you already have like almost like the Catalonian cava methodology where you don't, a Grand Reserva, there aren't that many of them because really you already have a lot of richness that comes from the climatic conditions. I know that's Mediterranean, but is that something you kind of move towards, less Lee's contact, more?
Um, Not really. I think like for certain styles, we like Leslie's contact. So if we're really trying to make the wine be driven by the primary fruit, like we make our our sparkling rosé, like we make two, but our sort of nicest one we call Topaz Imperial. That's trying to be like really 12, 18 months on the lease and really trying to be driven a lot by that primary fruit. And it's not really one that would be meant to be like aged on the cork even for like a decade. That one is really meant to respect that part of the grapes. When we make our Blanc de Noirs, we kind of ask ourselves that question as we move through time. We've seen people have liked a sort of more fruit driven version here in the States in our clientele than maybe a more steely one have made like one that you're like, oh, it's very traditional, champagne style Blanc de Noir, very crisp. People are missing that part of it. But then we also make other styles of wines that are not as driven by that. So we have the advantage of maybe about like 30 or so different lots coming in for us every year. So we're able to play with those different lots and we can pick the ones that are featuring sort of more acidity, more concentration, more length, and not as phenolically ripe though, for our extended lease aging stuff. And then we can also select some of the fruitier lots, particularly thinking Pinot Noir, that maybe won't age as gracefully, but will work very well in sort of these younger profiles where you really want more of that sort of rich fruit character that would go with that. So we have that separation. I think we're able to do a little bit of both. And every year, different lots give us different things. We grow about 9 different clones of Pinot Noir, and we'll see every year that certain ones are better for this, better for that. We do have like Pommard clones and the like 66777 clones. Jenny was familiar with some of these Pinot Noir clones. These Pommard clones traditionally are a little bit more lighter in color, a little bit more aromatic, and some of these heavier other 66777 ones are more for like darker fruit characteristics. So we have a bit of like a palette to play with, and we can kind of do both, I think. So we make a class of wines that are more primary fruit driven, and we make another class that are more extended lease.
And Andrew, I noticed on the two wines that you sent me, which you have the Brutes, which we got in the glass in a minute, is 2020, and then the Seduction,
Well, that would be the least driven one.
which is 2014. You those two are vintages. Is everything in your portfolio vintage, traditional method, or do you have any non-vintage or multi-vintage where you have the ability to age and blend?
Good question. Most of our wines are vintage wines. It's sort of the nature of the house from the beginning. We weren't really big enough to try to go with a non-vintage style. And I think also now we've just sort of embraced the vintage variation, and we're fortunate to get nice wines every year. The only non-vintage blend we do with our, I'll say, higher end wines is our Brut Nature, which is our zero dosage from a sugar perspective wine. We'll sometimes use some of those older reserve wines though in that dosage with no sugar, just to sort of still build that. And that is always going to probably be a blend of older wines because we'll need that texture we get from some barrel aging, some stainless steel aging to make something that really fills the palate without that sugar. After that, our sort of more entry level brand, which we call our Carnival series, which features a rosé that's an off dry blanc and a red sparkling. Those are advertised as non vintage wines. They may some years be a vintage wine, but they will most sometimes also get like a previous year's blend as well. So most everything is vintage except for some of those things.
The second then is a wine whose vintage predates when you started. So this is a 2014. This is the Sparkling Pointe Seduction by Gilles Martin. You'll see it just here. Tell us about this wine. So this is how long on the lees? When was it disgorged?
So this would have been disgorged in this last year. So it was bottled in 2015. All of our wines, if you see the vintage, you can assume it was bottled the year after that.
Yeah.
And then you can consider that as the sort of disgorgement time frame. We do have on all of our boxes, if you buy a case, the disgorgement dates are printed on all of them. We're moving towards trying to get them on the bottles as well.
So
So
what's
anyway,
the
so
incentive to buy a case? You get the discussion.
yeah, I mean, the information is on the website too. You could call us. We don't try to hide it. We just haven't figured out the logistics to get it on the bottle yet. So this one would be about 10 years. So this would have been disgorged in the end of 2025, a bottle in 2015. So that's 10 years on the lease. This brute seduction we have, we're usually having that to be somewhere between 6 and 10 years is that time frame. So we 14 was a very special vintage. Pretty much all of our 14s were pretty great. And across Long Island too. It's one of these magical years where we got both great quality and great yields. I was a premium wine group at that time. I do remember it well. And going through all the wines in the Sparkling Point portfolio of the 2014s, they've all been released since I've been here. They've all been some of my favorites, along with coming with the 19. And then actually, I think this year we've just had here 2025. I think is going to be pretty rocking. So this one here, we now starting to be more dominated by the secondary aged characteristics. You need more complexity, more richness. We're trying to build a cuvee that has enough concentration in the mid palate and length where that's going to carry through with the wine. Also trying to have wines that aren't as much of those phenolics, some of those characteristics that present themselves as nice fruit in the youth of a wine. As they get older, they tend to be like little clunkier, rougher. If we tried to age something like our topaz, for instance, for 10 years on the lease, it's not going to taste the same as this. It's going to have a very different characteristic. So we make a very special wine just for this special bottling. It's not just our brut that's got a different label that's sat down for a long time. We make a specific one in our best years for extended lease aging.
What I really love about, well, there's two things I really love about this. First of all, is that it's in that early phase of its development where it's just getting the mushroom sort of character, that kind of tertiary note, along with almond and elevated brioche notes, whatever you want to call it, pastry, blah, blah, blah. But it's just going into that sort of mushroom area, but still then has all the freshness behind it, which is really lovely. The second thing is that it's a 2014, so it reminds me of when times were politically easier, pre-2016 for both the US and the UK. Let's not go into too much detail, but in 2014, the UK was a part of Europe. So that's one thing I really fondly think about with this as well. But I love the development on this, Andrew. I love that it's just getting the mushroomy characteristic, that tertiary note, which can be very dominating in an old sparkling wine. I've tried many that have not aged so well on cork, and they have, not held together, and they've gone almost kind of quite soupy and savory on the finish. And this just has a lift and freshness.
Yeah, we try to really try to release to the market things that are not on the cork for too long. So we try to really stagger our disgorgements if we have a large, part of the reason why we don't have it on the bottle, actually. So the nitty gritty of a larger sparkling house, we can't disgorge it all on one day.
Yeah.
No one can. So like if we print labels for it, like, you got to think about that over time. And for a large production for one of our lots, we might, large for our small winery, we might disgorge it over 3 or 4 times over the course of a year and a half to try to keep it fresh for the producer. I mean, I've had this wine from different vintages on the cork for maybe 3, 4, or 5 years. It's still quite good, but it certainly will start to lose some fizz as that time goes on. You hit that 5 year on the cork mark. Still an enjoyable wine, but slowly becoming less of a sparkling wine and more of an older, interesting still wine. But sometimes, we surprise. I opened a 2000 a couple a couple months ago, and we all enjoyed it. But not as much effervescence for sure.
And Andrew, one thing I'm quite passionate about is most interviews. If it's a champagne producer, or if it's a Burgundy producer, if it's a Rioja producer, they would always ask a question, going, "What would you have this with? What food would you have this with?" And we don't tend to see that question when it's someone being interviewed in California or Virginia or New York, because I don't know. I think people just expect that they don't do food and wine matching the same as like the French or the Italian or Spanish would. So this is why I'm going to ask this question, what would we have this with locally? And we love, seafood across New England, right? There's a New York State, some cracking seafood. But what would be your go-to for both these sparkling wines in terms of food matching?
I mean, we joke that the sparkling wine is good with everything. because it is. So like it's a cop out, but like it's true. You can really go with anything. I think what's special about something like the Brut Seduction, a wine like that, you can like open up different avenues of pairing a sparkling wine than you would normally think. So you're thinking like light food, seafood, maybe as an aperitif or something with something like the Brut or a more normal champagne that people would have. But once you get into these extended leasage, like a roast chicken, like risotto, like something with like a lot of richness, that can really stand up really well. Seafood for me, man, if you can get a really nice bay scallop, like we used to have them in the Peconic Bay here. It's got climate change, man. It got too warm for them or something.
Yeah.
But if you can find them, if you go up to Massachusetts, the Cape Cod bay scallops, they tend to be like very sweet. It's like these very particular bay scallops we get in the Northeast that have like this really incredible sweetness. That sweetness like matches so well with the sparkling wine. It's like a pairing I really love is the Peconic bay scallops and the sparkling wines.
And Andrew,
We get a lot of oysters here, like so classic oysters and champagne. Oysters and sparkling, we're blessed with like this beautiful mariculture industry that's developed here really in just my time out here in the last 15 years. There was always clamors. My dad was actually a bayman before he became a teacher on the Great South Bay. And all these oyster farmers have started up. So we were able to get all these super fresh, amazing oysters. And the ones we get here are kind of like a little smaller. They're not like the big Gulf oysters or the big ones maybe you would see in certain parts of France, or at least my limited experience in getting them there, which is good for me because I'm kind of a baby with the Roy oyster. So a nice little, very sweet one. And they go really well with the sparkling wine. So it's local seafood, man, bay scallop if you can get one. And then there's wonderful oysters throughout the whole Northeast. A lot of, besides just the Long Island war.
absolutely. And
But yeah, oysters.
visiting Connecticut, and when you go to a real good seafood restaurant and you have some Massachusetts oysters, you have some you'll get some probably Canadian, some PEI oysters, but you'll get New York, you'll get Connecticut, and I love that there's diversity in the oysters, which means you don't people just go oysters is good with a certain type, Chablis or just a brut champagne or whatever. It's not as easy as that because there are so many different types. And I love I like smaller oysters because the bigger ones you have to get a knife and fork to are not proper for me. That's too much. That's a different thing.
Maybe if they fried, I can do it fried.
True, absolutely. The other thing I'd like to mention is one of my fixes that I have to get as soon as I'm in New England is a Maine lobster roll.
I sensed you were going to say that.
It's like it just has to happen, and I think warm would be great with the 2014 that we've got here.
A sleeper pick is I think they might call it the Connecticut lobster roll, the warm butter one.
Yeah.
Oh, if you really, I love that one too. Sometimes it's got to be hot though. If it cools down quite really, but a nice hot one, like I say, put like warm butter, man, and nice and simple, like that's really great. Anything with butter too, like butter, onions, like chives, things like that with the sparkling wines and Chardonnay in particular, particularly like a Blanc de Blanc even. Like that stuff is a wonderful match for me. Like roast chicken. But yeah, you're lucky if you come probably just like up near you. If you go to restaurants here, they'll let you do an oyster sampling. You get like 3 or 4 different types of oysters on your tray that brought out to your table. It's wonderful.
Oh man, my belly's rumbling already, and I'm not back in Connecticut for another few months. But hey, I'm looking forward to it. Andrew, thank you so much for your time and your passion behind the wonderful project of Sparkling Pointe. It's been really lovely to find out about the finer details, the history, the climate and the weather of Long Island, the geology, and to taste a couple of these wonderful sparkling wines, which are definitely going to be more of a feature in my Connecticut base when I'm out there. And you must let me know who you work with in Connecticut as well. I'm definitely gonna.
Yeah, we have distribution in Connecticut.
You do or don't?
We do.
Oh, fantastic, brilliant. Well, that's music to my ears.
Well, please still come visit us too.
No, of course.
Across the ferry.
Easy peasy. That will be a no-brainer for sure. So, any closing remarks, Andrew, for anybody? Do you want to share any? Do you have a restaurant, visitor center? When are you open? Social media, anything?
Yeah, we're open 7 days a week, so pretty easy. The only days we're usually closed are the Super Bowl, actually. Like Good Friday, Christmas. So you're pretty much in pretty good shape if you're going to come on the weekends. But I behoove you to just go on our website, sparklingpointe.com. Don't forget the E at the end of point, and that will you can book a reservation there to make sure you have a table. We do wonderful table service here. We have a selection of local cheeses and meats And we usually have some sort of fun events here or there, or food pairings that we'll do throughout the season on the weekends too. So please, yeah, please do come. With a beautiful tasting room right here with our vineyard. And if you are picking any time of the year in particular to come, I really recommend, if you're into wine, come in that first week of September, second week of September. That's when we're pressing the grapes. People are welcome to come back to the press pad, taste a little juice, explain the process. It's a lot of fun.
Amazing. Well, that's very honest of you, Andrew. A lot of winemakers are like, don't visit during harvest and press time, but that's really lovely for you to invite people out during that.
Most people just want to taste a little juice, see it from a distance, and they're happy as can be. We got to make the time for people, man. This is the fun part of the time. Even though it's the busiest time, it's the most fun time too. Coming in January, happily to spend time with you. It's pretty boring to walk around the winery and just look at a bunch of tanks full of wine. Not so fun.
Very true. Very true. Better to enjoy Long Island, I think, during definitely when it's a little bit warm.
It's our best weather too. It's usually still a little dry. There's a lot of other agricultural activities going. It's really cranking out here. And then right after Labor Day, which is that first week in September, it's really died down. That's like the peak season. So if you are able to come at that time too, like right after Labor Day, probably a little easier to move around too and find operations.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Everybody else out there, thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. You can drop your comment or your question in the section below this video, or get in touch with Wine with Jimmy, info@winewithjimmy.com. Andrew, thank you so much, and cheers.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Cheers.
Cheers.